HOA. Karen stole my electric bike for a quick ride, so I locked the control and watched her kill herself. Maybe it all started with a simple hello, the kind of greeting you'd expect from a new neighbor. But in our HOA community, things were far from simple. I'm talking about Karen, that Karen, the self-appointed neighborhood watchdog who seemed to have nothing better to do than monitor every move I made. From the moment I moved in, Karen's eyes were on me. At first, it was just the occasional complaint. "Your grass is a quarter-inch too high," she'd say, or "that shade of white on your fence isn't quite right." I'd brush it off, thinking maybe she was just particular about the neighborhood's appearance. But then, things started to escalate. Karen began documenting my comings and goings, as if I was some sort of criminal under surveillance. She'd stand at her window, notepad in hand, jotting down the times I left for work, when I came home, even how long my visitors stayed. It was unsettling, to say the least. The situation reached a boiling point when I bought my electric bike. Oh boy, you should have seen Karen's face when I rode it home for the first time. Her eyes nearly popped out of her head, and I swear I could see the steam coming out of her ears. To Karen, this wasn't just a mode of transportation, it was a declaration of war. "Who does he think he is?" I overheard her saying to another neighbor. "Riding around on that thing like he owns the place. It's disrupting the peace and quiet of our community." Peace and quiet. More like the peace and quiet of Karen's tightly controlled little kingdom. Soon after, the notices started appearing in my mailbox. First, it was a friendly reminder about noise pollution. Then came the warnings about unauthorized vehicles in the neighborhood. Karen had somehow convinced the HOA board that my electric bike was a menace to society. But here's the kicker: the threats. Oh, the threats. Karen started leaving notes on my door, saying things like, "One more ride on that bike, and you'll regret it." Or, "Accidents happen to those who don't follow the rules." It was like living in a bizarre suburban thriller where the villain wore floral prints and had a perfect perm. I tried reasoning with her. I even invited her over for coffee to discuss her concerns. But Karen was beyond reason. In her mind, I was the outsider, the troublemaker, the one disrupting her perfect little world. Little did I know, Karen's obsession with my electric bike would lead to a series of events that would shock our quiet community to its core. Her entitlement and jealousy were about to collide with reality in the most unexpected way. As I stand here now, looking back on those early days, I can't help but wonder, how did a simple neighborhood dispute spiral so out of control? What drives someone to such extreme behavior over something as innocuous as an electric bike? Well, folks, buckle up, because this story is about to take you on a wild ride through the twisted world of HOA politics, neighborly feuds, and the dangerous consequences of unchecked entitlement. Trust me, by the end of this tale, you'll never look at your neighbors the same way again. Before we go deeper into this suburban nightmare, I want to hear from you. Have you ever dealt with a Karen in your neighborhood? What's the craziest HOA rule you've encountered? Share your stories in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this glimpse into the dark side of suburban life, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more unbelievable true stories. Now, let's rewind a bit and set the stage for the day when Karen's obsession with my electric bike would reach its shocking climax. Now, let me paint you a picture of yours truly. I'm just your average guy, trying to make it in the world. I'd landed a decent job at a tech startup in the city, and this HOA community seemed like the perfect place to settle down, affordable, close to work, and seemingly peaceful. Oh, how appearances can be deceiving. The neighborhood itself was like something out of a 1950s sitcom. Most of my neighbors were retirees or empty nesters, spending their days tending to their gardens or gossiping over the fence. It was quaint, almost charming in its own way, that is, until I met Karen. Karen! Oh, Karen! Where do I even begin? Picture a middle-aged woman with a helmet of perfectly coiffed hair, always dressed like she's about to meet the queen, with a perpetual look of disapproval etched on her face. From the moment I moved in, she appointed herself as my personal tormentor, neighborhood watchdog. At first, Karen's complaints seemed almost comical. She'd march up to my door, clipboard in hand, to inform me that my grass was precisely 0.25 inches too high. Or she'd leave passive-aggressive notes about the unauthorized potted plant on my porch. Once, she even measured the distance between my garbage cans and the curb, insisting they were a full inch out of regulation. But as time went on, Karen's obsession with my every move began to take a darker turn. She started documenting my comings and goings like some sort of deranged private investigator. I'd catch glimpses of her peeking through her curtains, scribbling furiously in a notebook every time I left for work or came home late. The tension in the neighborhood was palpable. Other residents started to give me sympathetic looks, some even warning me in hushed tones about Karen's history of driving out newcomers who didn't fit her idea of the perfect neighbor. Then came the day that would change everything, the day I brought home my electric bike. Now, let me tell you, I was excited about this purchase. It was eco-friendly, would save me money on gas, and hey, it was just plain fun to ride. I felt like a kid again, zipping around the neighborhood with the wind in my hair. But to Karen, my new bike might as well have been a Harley-Davidson with the muffler removed. The first time she saw me riding it, her face turned a shade of red I didn't think was humanly possible. "Showing off," she muttered loud enough for the whole street to hear. "Thinks he owns the place." From that day forward, Karen's surveillance of my activities reached new heights of absurdity. She'd time my bike rides, document the noise pollution, which was practically non-existent, and even started a petition to ban electric bikes from the neighborhood. The threats and notices started piling up. First, it was a friendly reminder about noise ordinances. Then came the official-looking documents about unauthorized vehicles in the HOA. Karen had somehow convinced half the board that my electric bike was a menace to society, comparable to a monster truck in a china shop. One morning, I found a note taped to my bike. "Accidents happen to those who don't follow the rules," it read in Karen's unmistakable handwriting. It was clear that in her mind, this had become a holy war against the scourge of electric bikes and the threat they posed to her perfect little world. As the days went by, I couldn't help but wonder, how far would Karen go to assert her perceived authority? What would be her breaking point? Little did I know, I was about to find out in the most unexpected and dramatic way possible. Before we dive into the shocking turn of events that would rock our quiet community, I want to hear from you. Have you ever encountered someone who took their authority too far? What would you have done in my situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more unbelievable true stories. Now brace yourselves, because what happened next is something I still can hardly believe. Number, the theft. It was a beautiful Saturday afternoon when everything came to a head. I had just returned from a long, refreshing ride on my electric bike. The sun was shining, birds were chirping, and for once, there wasn't a Karen in sight. I felt relaxed, maybe even a bit careless. I pulled into my driveway, the gentle hum of the electric motor fading as I came to a stop. In my post-ride bliss, I made a crucial mistake. I left the key in the ignition. I'll just run inside for a quick drink. I thought to myself, what could possibly happen in 5 minutes? Oh, how naive I was. I jogged inside, gulped down some water, and headed back out. But as I opened my front door, I froze. My driveway was empty. The bike was gone. For a moment, I stood there, blinking in disbelief. Had I somehow forgotten where I parked? No, that was ridiculous. My mind raced through possibilities. A neighborhood thief? Some teenagers playing a prank? Or could it be? No, surely not even Karen would go that far. As panic started to set in, I felt something in my pocket. The remote control for the bike. A wave of relief washed over me, quickly followed by a surge of determination. Whoever took my bike couldn't have gotten far. I sprinted down the street, my eyes darting left and right, searching for any sign of my beloved bike. And then I saw it, or rather, I saw her. There, in all her glory, was Karen. But this wasn't the prim and proper Karen we all knew. No, this was Karen unleashed. Her perfectly coiffed hair was wild in the wind, her floral dress flapping as she recklessly sped down the street on my electric bike. For a moment, I couldn't believe my eyes. Karen, the self-appointed guardian of neighborhood propriety, was joyriding on the very vehicle she had fought so hard to ban. The irony was almost laughable. Almost. As I watched her weave dangerously between parked cars, a dilemma hit me. I had the power to stop her with the push of a button. But should I? The potential consequences raced through my mind. If I activated the kill switch, Karen could get hurt, but if I didn't, who knew what damage she might cause in her reckless ride? Time seemed to slow down as I weighed my options. Karen was approaching a busy intersection. Cars were coming. In that split second, I made my decision. I pressed the button. The effect was immediate. The bike's motor cut out, but Karen's momentum carried her forward. I watched in horror as she lost control, the bike wobbling violently. She let out a shriek that could have woken the dead as she careened towards a telephone pole. Wham! Karen collided with the pole, the impact sending her flying off the bike. She landed in a heap on someone's perfectly manicured lawn, her limbs tangled in a way that would have been comical if it wasn't so shocking. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, the neighborhood erupted into chaos. People came running out of their houses, phones in hand, some dialing 911, others already starting to record the scene. As I rushed towards Karen, my heart pounding, I couldn't help but wonder, was this justice served, or had the punishment far exceeded the crime? Karen groaned, slowly sitting up. She was scraped and bruised, but miraculously, nothing seemed broken, except, perhaps, her pride. Before we get into the aftermath of this incredible incident, I want to hear your thoughts. What would you have done in my position? Was using the kill switch the right call, or should I have found another way to stop Karen? Share your opinions in the comments below. And if you're as shocked by this turn of events as I was, make sure to like and subscribe. Trust me, the fallout from this incident is something you won't want to miss. As the dust settled and Karen lay groaning on the lawn, the gravity of the situation hit me like a ton of bricks. I rushed over, my heart pounding, to check on her condition. "Karen, are you okay? Don't move. Help is on the way," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Neighbors poured out of their houses, a mix of shock, concern, and I'll admit, a bit of morbid curiosity on their faces. Mrs. Johnson from across the street was already on the phone with 911, her voice shrill as she tried to explain the bizarre scene unfolding on our quiet suburban street. Within minutes, the wail of sirens filled the air. Paramedics arrived first, quickly assessing Karen's condition. Miraculously, she had escaped with only minor injuries, some scrapes, bruises, and what would likely be a spectacular array of colorful contusions in the coming days. As they loaded her into the ambulance, I could have sworn I saw a flicker of embarrassment in her eyes, but maybe that was just wishful thinking. The police weren't far behind, and that's when the real circus began. Trying to explain this situation to the officers was like something out of a bad sitcom. "Yes, officer, she stole my electric bike. No, I didn't push her off. Yes, I did use a remote kill switch. No, I'm not making this up." The looks on their faces as they tried to make sense of it all were priceless. I half expected them to look around for hidden cameras, thinking they were being pranked. As the police took statements and gathered evidence, the neighborhood buzzed with activity. People huddled in small groups, whispering and gesticulating wildly. I could practically see the rumor mill spinning into overdrive. The community's reaction was as divided as you might expect. Some neighbors, those who had been on the receiving end of Karen's vigilance over the years, couldn't hide their smirks. Others were appalled, both by Karen's actions and my response. "Two wrongs don't make a right," I overheard Mrs. Peterson saying, shaking her head disapprovingly. The next week, an emergency HOA board meeting was called. The community center was packed, every chair filled and people standing along the walls. The air was thick with tension as the board tried to navigate this unprecedented situation. "We've never had an incident like this, Mr. Thompson," the board president said, his voice grave. "It raises serious questions about our community guidelines, personal property rights, and the limits of neighborhood watch activities." The debate was heated. Some called for Karen's immediate removal from the community. Others argued for stricter rules on unauthorized vehicles, though I noticed they were careful not to make eye contact with me when saying this. A few even suggested I should be held responsible for Karen's injuries. As the meeting wore on, it became clear that the implications of this incident reached far beyond just Karen and me. It had exposed deep-seated tensions in our community, bringing to light issues of power, control, and the fine line between community involvement and invasive behavior. The legal consequences were another can of worms entirely. Karen was facing potential charges for theft and reckless endangerment. Meanwhile, I was warned about possible liability for her injuries, despite the fact that she had stolen my property. The whole situation was a legal minefield. As the dust began to settle in the weeks following the incident, as it came to be known in neighborhood lore, I found myself doing a lot of soul-searching. This bizarre series of events had taught me some valuable, if unexpected, lessons. First and foremost, I learned the importance of security, both for my property and my peace of mind. You can bet I never left my keys in the bike again, and I invested in some serious locks and a security camera for good measure. But beyond that, I gained a new perspective on community relations. While Karen's actions were inexcusable, I had to admit that my own attitude hadn't always been perfect. Had I been too dismissive of her concerns even when they were unreasonable? Could I have done more to bridge the gap between us? The incident also shed light on the dangers of unchecked entitlement and vigilantism. Karen's belief that she had the right to enforce her vision of the neighborhood had led her down a path that ended in injury and humiliation. It was a stark reminder that no matter how right we think we are, taking matters into our own hands can have serious consequences. As for our community, the healing process was slow but steady. The HOA board implemented new guidelines for dispute resolution, encouraging dialogue and mediation before things could escalate. They also organized community events aimed at bringing neighbors together and fostering a sense of shared responsibility for our little corner of the world. Karen, to everyone's surprise, emerged from the incident a changed woman. Whether it was the embarrassment, the legal consequences, or simply the shock of the experience, she dialed back her vigilante tendencies. We even managed to have a civil conversation over the fence a few months later, though I made sure to keep my bike safely locked away in the garage. As I stand here now, looking back on that crazy chapter of my life, I can't help but wonder, how can communities strike that delicate balance between individual rights and collective harmony? Is it possible to create a neighborhood where people feel both free to be themselves and responsible to each other? I don't have all the answers, but I do know this. It takes effort, understanding, and a willingness to see things from other perspectives. It's not always easy, but it's worth it. Because at the end of the day, we're all just trying to find our place in this world, even if that place is a quiet suburban street with an HOA and the occasional electric bike. Before we wrap up this wild tale, I want to hear from you one last time. Have you ever been part of a community that successfully balanced individual freedom with collective responsibility? What do you think is the key to creating harmonious neighborhoods? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. And if you've enjoyed this roller coaster of a story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Who knows? Your own neighborhood might just provide the material for our next unbelievable true story. As we wrap up this incredible journey, I want to leave you with a few final thoughts. First, I encourage each of you to take a moment and reflect on your own neighborhood dynamics. Are there any Karens in your life? Or, more importantly, are there times when you might be acting a bit Karen-like yourself? It's easy to point fingers, but true growth comes from looking inward. Remember, behind every conflict, there's usually a person who feels unheard or misunderstood. The next time you find yourself at odds with a neighbor, try taking a step back. Ask yourself, what might they be feeling? What could I do to bridge this gap? Communication and empathy are powerful tools. They can transform conflicts into opportunities for growth and understanding. It's not always easy, but it's always worth it. In the end, our neighborhoods are what we make of them. They can be battlegrounds of petty disputes, or they can be havens of community and support. The choice is ours. So, I challenge you, be the neighbor you'd want to have. Reach out, listen, understand, and who knows, you might just turn a potential Karen into a friend. Thank you for joining me on this wild ride. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more like it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support means the world to me.